Welcome, Aditi, and I am so glad you're here. I've been waiting kind of for this interview. It's quite a while that we connected. I think I just started my podcast, and I was drawn to you. You know, it's funny how you people jump out at you on Instagram. This is where we met, Instagram, right?
Yes. Mhm.
You're in Canada like me, but you're far away from me in Calgary, and you jumped out at me, I think, because you were sharing for the first time online that you were separating. So that was the first part of it. And then it was just the way you shared it that intrigued me. And then I jumped into your profile, of course, like we all do, or at least I do. And
I
I
did too.
also noticed, of course, the work that you do. You're a pregnancy loss and infant loss coach. And
Mhm.
I have my own loss story, stillbirth. Like I said to you just when we were talking before the show, about 28 years ago now. I can't believe it's been that long. So I really felt connected to you simply because we were sharing experiences in life. So I'm really thrilled to be talking to you today. And there's so many things I want to get into. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yes, and thanks for your patience because I know we did try to we tried to organize this a little while ago, and yes, life got in the way. So thanks for your
Life gets in the way. I somehow managed to fill the airspace with something. So
patience.
mostly my own voice, yes. But yeah, I we have two sort of big things that we can talk about today. And I don't want to, as much as this is a divorce podcast, I don't want to ignore the work that you do, because I know one of the things that also drew me to you is that you're so passionate about women's health, the women supporting women, obviously, and that's so embedded in the work that you do, and that's something that I've always been very passionate about. Even before I started doing the divorce work, I was in the fitness and health space where I was helping women who were actually having babies, and so just a lot of I love when women are helping women and supporting women, and so that was one of the things. So I just want to get into your work a little bit and talk to you a bit about, first of all, how did you get into that work? I think I know that you have a similar story to why I got into the work I'm doing now. I've gone through divorce, so now I'm a divorce coach, right? So
Mhm.
go ahead, tell us how you got into this.
Yeah, very, very similar. I think those of us that like work in service, we come to this work because of lived experience, and that's definitely a part of my story. I used to work as a social worker, and then when my partner, my now ex-partner, and I started to try to build a family, my first two pregnancies were ended in loss. The first one was very traumatic. They both were very traumatic in different ways, but the first one was definitely traumatic in the care that I received as a woman of color in healthcare. And my second loss was a later loss. Then I got pregnant for the third time with my now 9-year-old living child.
Mhm.
Um, and that grief and that anxiety didn't go away in that pregnancy. It actually got worse,
Yeah.
and lingered with me for well over a year. And I would still say I think I still have heightened anxiety due to like the previous losses that I've had, even 9 years later. Um, so yeah, I knew that I wanted to be at home with my kiddo as much as I could, and I knew I didn't want to work in the traditional like social work setting anymore. And um, the universe kind of guided me here. There was like a lot of other things in between there that got me here, but I ended up starting coaching because I knew that I wasn't the only one that needed this type of support. Um, and I started coaching, and I from there built a charity. So I actually run I'm the founder CEO of a fast growing charity here in Calgary, but we serve across Canada and in North America as well. Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support Center. And from there, now I also run a coach certification training. So training other folks to basically use the model that I have used for basically thousands of families now in the coach arena. So yeah, lived experience and just noticing how impactful those losses were and how little meaningful support was out there. That's really what brought me to this
Yeah.
space. And and we serve every person. So women, female identifying, birthing people, birthing parents, um, basically anybody who's impacted by loss is who we serve.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for the work that you do, honestly. And when I went through this, like I said, it was 28 years ago, and something sort of revolutionary had just happened in that within that space, there was a new recognition for that women needed additional support, because prior, like not many years before I went through it, the protocol really was just to whisk that baby away and just
Mm-hmm.
send mom home, and let's just pretend that this never happened, right?
Yeah.
And the hospital where I delivered him, they had recently, like very recently, been trained in exactly how to manage what I went through. And honestly, I had a very positive experience, and I know from our conversations before that you didn't, which I'm so sorry to hear that, and even more sorry because of the reasons of it. Not that it's ever okay, but yeah. But I had a very positive experience from the standpoint that I think they did everything right for me. And that
Mm-hmm.
helped me. And I know how significant it was for me that I did get the support even there already. But I will say, once I left, it was, of course, that's when the work really begins, when
Yeah.
I went home again. And and I think this is so often that true when it comes to certain things in our lives. And I think often, especially what women tend to go through, um, we're supposed to be stoic. We're supposed to just manage. We're supposed to just put on the smile and be okay. So whether it is pregnancy loss, which I would think most women suffer it at some point in some way. Um, and then of course there's another big event, which is of course divorce. And I know that one of the stigmas we're up against, and men would obviously deal with the stigma as well, but uh, what did she do wrong? Did you not try hard enough? Like there's this expectation again. Couldn't you just make it work instead of embracing the fact that this woman needs support and help? And which is why I've jumped into this field. But I felt very alone. Back when I did this divorce, there was no Facebook group, there was no Zoom, there might have been podcasts. I didn't know anything about them. So it
Mm-hmm.
was an entirely different world. And I felt very, very alone. Like I was the only person I knew who'd gone through it, and therefore the only person who knew what it felt like. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm sure you felt that when you lost your child. And now I'm wondering if you feel that a little bit again in some ways. It's a new loss. It's different, but it's a loss.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's so many complexities there. I definitely felt that when I experienced pregnancy and infant loss. And I identify as a queer woman of color, and I'm very involved in the queer community as well. Like I am a racialized woman. And so those like intersections of my identity definitely made me feel even less seen. And I see this a lot, like which is why like when I speak about the work that I do, I use very like gender inclusive language, because pregnancy and infant loss affects absolutely like cisgender women, but it also like affects trans or non-binary folks, and folks that are in same-sex relationships and partners and all of it. And so I feel like those folks that are going through it, and the racialized folks, like there's an additional grief and kind of isolation and kind of pushed to this perimeter of the experience, that definitely impacts. And that was my experiences when I went for support. There was nobody that looked like me offering this support.
Yeah.
There was nobody that identified as queer, and I'm more comfortably now identifying in that space. But there was a lot of shame around that, even
Yeah.
because I was married to a cisgender male. And so, yeah, and now I'm finding that those same grief and those same like complexities and intersections of my identity are coming up in this space of separation and divorce, very much so.
Yeah. Okay. And I definitely want to get back to that. Something just jumped into my mind while you were talking about that, and
Yeah.
same gendered and again, I'm going to talk about women or females who identify that way. But I have some clients who identify like that, and they divorce. And I remember what one of them said to me. She felt there was an additional layer because she goes, I went through so much to come out and
Mm-hmm.
be this person. And in fact, not just be gay, she said, but to be someone who wanted to marry a woman. And she goes, was very much against what her family had wanted for her. And, so she dealt with all of that. And then she goes, and then we're getting divorced. We didn't even make it. And it just,
Mm-hmm.
I think she feels a lot of that now there might be additional judgment because it's wrong for two women to be married, or
Yeah.
because you made a mistake that's not really who you are. It invalidates her experience in a
I
way.
was going to say very invalidating, very
Yeah.
invalidating. Yeah.
And
And
I
same
know
for
that's,
those folks who are experiencing pregnancy and infant loss who maybe had to have assisted fertility. You go through so much to get there and then you
yeah,
experience loss. And it can be society's very invalidating to people who have different intersections
yeah, a different
in their
experience, just
identity.
even
Yeah.
slightly different.
Even slightly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
still, it's still a woman or, a female going through this. But just because of yeah. So, oh, I lost my train of thought there.
That's okay. There's so much to talk about.
Mm. I saw on your website that something like 40% of couples who experience stillbirth and 20% who experience miscarriage are more like they're 40% and 20% more likely to end up in divorce. And
Yes.
I found that interesting, not surprising, honestly, but I found it interesting that they had done that there's numbers that have been produced on this.
Mhm.
And I would love for you to speak to that a little bit, on two levels. First of all, just from an industry standpoint, I guess, just from your knowledge and your experience, and then I guess if you'd be comfortable speaking about it from a personal experience as well, if you
Yeah.
feel that played in.
Yes. Yeah. So from a professional standpoint, yes, that is a statistic that I came about, when I'm doing grant writing and, all those beautiful things that you have to prove that this is an impactful experience.
Yeah.
And it came by that stat and it made me really reflect on the families that I have supported. And the partnerships that I've supported. And yeah, relationships are deeply impacted after pregnancy and infant loss. People grieve so differently. Um, and the relationship changes. And so sometimes it changes where the two people become closer, and sometimes it changes where the two people grieve so differently. And then I would say like areas that were hard in the relationship kind of become highlighted
Yeah.
within that space. So, and I can say for me personally that absolutely the pregnancy and infant losses and my experience then with postpartum definitely led to our separation 9-10 years post pregnancy and infant loss. I don't know that if you would have asked me that at the very beginning when I said I think like I'm not happy and I think that we should separate. If you would have asked me if pregnancy and infant loss really was the reason or one of the reasons I should say, then I don't know that I would have said yes. In hindsight, now looking back, now that I've had like over a year to kind of reflect on the journey and really sit with it more. Yes, yes, absolutely. It
Yeah.
was a turning point in our relationship.
Yeah. I went through, and again, at the time, I didn't look at it. I didn't love myself because what I was learning about my now ex was not something I wanted to know. But I remember there was just this part of my subconscious that became aware back then when we were going through it, but I felt like I was doing it by myself. I realized that he was not someone who was going to be there for me if
Mm,
I had hardships in my life, like serious health issues, or I don't know, just these things. I remember finding myself, I mean, how old was I at the time? 28. And I found myself thinking, if I have serious health issues or anything like that when I get older and I need him to take care of me, I'm effed. Like, this is just, he's not the
mm,
person who's going to do that. And
mm,
that was really hard for me. And I did push it away because it was like one of those flashes that came to me. And when I saw how he was able to support me at the time, and then I pushed it away. And I mean, we stayed together for many years after that. But it is very eye-opening. And I really believe when people are in crisis, they can't filter who they are anymore. Like he was in crisis as well. He was grieving, as was I. Very different ways of dealing with it. And for him, yeah, sharing and giving was not his way. So
Mm-hmm.
it's I wouldn't say that that event was tied to it, but it was definitely tied to my ability to then, it was one of those, it was just one of those check marks, like I can't
Yeah.
be in this marriage anymore because all of these things. And that was just one of them, probably. Just
Yeah,
realized.
I think like I kind of look at like the relationship, the marriage kind of like as this like thing that over time slowly unraveled, and like the pieces were kind of falling, and like so that was definitely like a piece of it. And then my
Yeah.
postpartum anxiety, I definitely know that I was difficult. I was like, I take ownership in that. I was difficult because I was definitely moving through so much grief and anxiety and fear, that wasn't understood and wasn't supported by, I would say everybody in my life was, didn't know how to deal with me.
I'm sure there
Um,
must have been a level of, well, you have a baby now. What's the problem, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Why are you like, what is going on? Like, your child is here, just focus on that,
Mhm.
without actually addressing the issue. So yeah, it was definitely one of the pieces that fell.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can really understand that. Um, so would you say then, I mean, as you're now going through an entirely different experience, whether it's tied or not, it is a different experience.
Hmm.
Um, do you find that the tools that helped you get through and that you've learned and that you're in fact now coaching women who are experiencing pregnancy and infant loss, those tools, are you able to use them to go through this divorce?
I would say yes and no.
Okay, so tell me
um,
some of the tools that you are able to use and then tell me what the no is about.
yeah, the so when I coach people through pregnancy and infant loss, and when I speak about like our coaching program, I always say like it's niched for pregnancy and infant loss, but it really is applicable to anyone going through any type of grief and loss experience. And
Mhm.
it's more like spiritual, soulful coaching.
Yeah.
Like our, not religious, but like our spirit, our soul, like connecting with that. So absolutely those tools are there, like me connecting to myself, trusting, going into that intuitive trusting place that I know is there. um Taking those moments of reflection, like really allowing myself a space to grieve, because I think that we get so busy, especially those of us if we're moving through and we do have living children. It's very, you don't necessarily feel like you have time,
Yeah.
but I know like dedicating intentional time for ritual, for ceremony, for practice, those things, those tools definitely have helped me navigate the divorce and the separation. And then it's kind of this interesting place of ego, I would say. There's no
Okay.
other word that I can find for it, but ego, in the sense that, well, I am a loss and grief expert. This is how I have, this is a big, I mean, it is my work. It is my life, and it fulfills me. This work is just like breathes life into me. And yet I am not the expert in this area.
Hmm.
I am the student now, and I have to be humble enough to go, yes, I do have tools that have helped me in similar loss and grief experiences. And I still need to be open and flexible to connecting, building community, and learning from others that have gone through this type of grief and loss experience.
Hmm.
Because, like you said, while they're similar, they're different.
Oh, absolutely, they're different.
Hmm.
The only part that's really similar is that it is a loss
Yeah.
and
And
there
there's
will be
grief.
grief. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm like a vastly different person. I mean, I'm 42 today. When I had well, when I gave birth to my living child, I was 33, so my
Mhm.
losses were early 30s. I'm like not even the same person. Like I'm literally not the same person as I was then. So of course this is going to be, there's just so much more. Plus I'm a
Yeah.
parent, I'm a mom. I have different responsibilities. I run like a really big charity that's rapidly growing. Like there's just so many differences now than then. So yeah, I think yes, there's definitely tools that have helped, that I've leaned on, that are familiar and have helped keep me afloat during this. And then there's times where I have just found myself just completely in an overwhelmed state, not knowing what to do,
Hmm.
because I am new. I am new
Yeah.
in this space.
Well, and you're not just new, you are going through it. And I think,
Yeah,
it's,
I'm in it.
yeah, and that's, I think, again, I think as women, we've often been taught, like I said earlier, to manage, to figure it out, to, we figure out so much, and especially when it comes to family and that kind of stuff. We're pretty good at reaching out. We want to talk to someone, which is good. And I think this is one of those times where we really need to be around people who understand, because, when I went through my divorce, which was years after my loss, um, like I said to you before we started, I didn't have a Facebook group. There was nothing like that. It didn't exist. So my only support was girlfriends, family, and none of them had gone through it. I was the only one I
Mhm.
knew who'd gone through divorce. I was the first I got married. I was the first to have kids, and I was the first to get divorced. So it
Mhm.
was really it was really hard. And that's one of the reasons I started the Separation Club, was to give women a place to go. And you've been in my Facebook group, where they hear other stories and they're like, oh, there's somebody else who's feeling exactly like me. So I'm
Mhm.
normal. There's nothing wrong with me for feeling the way I feel. And then there's hope, because you also hear from the people who are actually getting through it. And
Mhm.
I think we need all of those things. We need the community. We need to know that somebody really gets it, and somebody who's not going to judge or say something really inappropriate. You know,
Yeah.
I think that's
Yes.
really important when we go through these kinds of things. And like I said in the beginning, coaches need coaches too. We have to remember that just because we know something
Mhm.
over here doesn't mean we know how to take care of ourselves. The same with doctors. They're not allowed to treat their family, right? And there should
Yeah,
be,
it's been a deeply, I think that's been like the most deeply humbling part of this experience, honestly, is that I'm often looked at as the supporter. And I think I
yeah,
also, like, my ego also tells me that that's who I am. And that's not, that's not how I can get through this.
no,
And so I've really humbled myself and leaned into like support in ways that I've never um, like been open to accepting support before. So
yeah.
it's been really deeply humbling.
Well, I'm really glad you're doing that. And I somebody when I went through this, somebody suggested that I send an email to everyone I know and ask them to describe me with one word. And I think the purpose of the exercise was good, in that people are generally going to say something nice, and you're going through something awful, and you'll hear, an overwhelming amount of those emails that I got back said strong. And it didn't make me feel better. It
No.
made me feel like I didn't have permission to fall apart. And that's how
Hmm.
I felt my life. I felt like I was falling apart, but I felt like I had to hide it because everybody thought I was so strong. And that's what they'd say to me as well. Oh my God, Elizabeth, you're doing so well. You're so strong. Look at you. And it was like, I might have been right on the tip of my tongue to say I'm having a horrible day, but now I couldn't say it anymore. I wasn't
Hmm.
allowed to be that
Yeah.
person who was just not coping that day.
Yeah. Because your identity is wrapped up in that. I like everyone thinks I'm strong, so I have to be strong.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're honestly, we can't be strong and we're tired of being strong. And sometimes we do need that space to literally just unravel. And that's, to me, that is strength.
That is strength. I agree. I was
Yeah.
just about to say that.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the falling apart is what it is strength, because that's where we find that innate like ability to move forward, not from this like pretending that we're strong.
Yes. And it has made me, if I learned something from my own divorce experience, I learned many things. I became a new person. That experience changed me.
Mhm.
But I learned that saying things to people like, oh, you got this, girl, you can do it, you can do anything. I mean, every now and then it's appropriate to say something like that, but in general, that statement shuts people down. It shuts the door on, but I'm not okay. Like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
okay. And that was like I remember, I'll make this very short, but I remember going for it to get my hair done when I was in the thick of the legal part. And my ex was very hostile. It was a very toxic divorce. It was very, anyway, it was a stressful one. And I was getting my hair done. I was excited about just sitting and being taken care of for a couple of
Mm-hmm.
hours, highlights, cut, the works. And I forgot that about 4 months earlier when I'd been there, this woman had uh, kind of unloaded on me on about her troubles in her marriage. And at that particular day, I was feeling strong. I was feeling great. I was having a good day, and I was there for her. And we talked, and she's like, "Oh, you're so wise." So I mean, I walk in that day. I'm not in a strong place. I'm very fragile that day. And the first thing she said to me, she goes, "Oh, I've been waiting for you to come all day. I can't wait to talk to you. You're so wise, and I got so much I want to ask you." And I was like, "Oh, this isn't my
Yeah.
time." And I
Mm-hmm.
actually wasn't even, I almost started crying when she said that, which of course I wouldn't allow myself to do. I wouldn't allow myself to say, I can't be there for you today. I wouldn't want to disappoint anyone. So I just sat there and I hardly said a word. She actually, I think she must have picked up on it finally because she just stopped talking to me. Not that she was rude or anything. She just
Mm-hmm.
stopped talking to me and
Yeah.
we were in silence, which was heaven for me at that point.
Yes.
But I left that appointment and I sat in my car and cried. Like, well, we all sit in our car and cry, right? But that was that was the day I realized that I don't want to be seen as so strong that I can't be not strong. Like
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I wasn't allowed to, and that
Mm-hmm. And
was that
that's
was.
why I opened up on social media. Because
Mhm.
for me, I've always been somebody who's like very authentic. Like I'm not one of those posters that like posts on it, social media to just for the sake of content.
Yeah,
I post from like a place of like authenticity,
yeah,
and so I really, when we first were going through it, I really was like, do I say it? Do I not say it? Because I also realized, for out of respect to my ex-partner, like what should I say and how can I post in a
mhm,
way that's not, because there's his part of the story and there's mine, and
yeah,
how do I respect both? But I really felt like I needed to speak on it, and I still feel like I need to speak on it for that reason, because we all are human and we all
yeah,
are going through some sort of grief and loss. That is one thing that connects all of us. We all will experience grief and loss in some form or the other through our life. And so I don't feel like it's helpful for people if we are completely on the other side of it and then start talking about it,
absolutely.
because that messy middle
Well, it's when you
is
need people the
so important.
most.
Yeah, is so important for people to see, I think,
Mhm. Yes,
that messy middle.
there's too much of the I'm good now,
Yeah.
everything, is over. You're right. And I think that is really important. So I'm
Hmm.
glad you shared. Plus it allowed me to find you because that was the post
Yeah.
that grabbed me that day. And we weren't following each other. So
No,
I was meant
no.
to see that post that day.
Yeah, you
Um,
were.
I can switch gears just a little. Um, now I can't even remember if we talked about this before I started recording or after, but I will just bring it back for a second. You mentioned that when you went through your pregnancy loss, I believe your first one,
Hmm.
that being a woman of color had really impacted negatively, unfortunately, the care that
Hmm.
you got. And
Yeah.
I'm so sorry that you experienced that.
Thank you.
I wanted to bring it around to the divorce, and I know you're from, or your heritage is Indian, like from India, and I do know from conversations with other women that cultural element can play into this as well. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
actually even know if you're divorcing someone from the same background as you, but no. Okay. So, but either way, I think there's different set of expectations.
Hmm.
So if you could talk a bit to that as well. And
Yeah, I mean, I know that it plays a huge part in it. So my ex-partner is Caucasian.
okay.
Um, and that, even from the start, I think is was challenging. Um, just because our
From the start of
views
the
on,
marriage or from the start of the
yeah,
yeah.
from the
Mhm.
start of the marriage, not because of our family's like very accepting. Um, but fundamentally, like, our views and our values were different around family and
Yeah.
around marriage. He came from a divorced family. My family, my parents are still very happily married for 54 years. So very just different lived experience of what family and marriage and partnership looks like.
Yeah.
So I think that was a challenge right from the start. Um, and then now with the separation, I actually said this to my sister the other day. We were talking, and I said, like, I find it culturally, like, I find when I talk to my white friends and it's very dismissed. It's very like, oh, you're getting separated. Okay, well, like you said, time to move on. You got this. Like, you'll be fine. Everything's fine. Like, and oh, this, and then the next question out of their mouth is, so when are you dating? When it, like,
Yeah. Oh, I
right?
know.
And for me, from the East Indian cultures part of it, first of all, like, I do have family members, older family members that are divorced. None of them had children, or like one of them had a child, but like they divorced way later, where the child was like a grown up. So nobody had younger children. So I'm the first one in our family that's going through it with a younger child. Um, and there's a lot of like unspoken guilt and shame around it from a cultural perspective, and then also from a cultural perspective of like, yeah, that culture's perspective of like, okay, I am not going to jump into dating because like my kiddo is like my priority right now. And this is actually a really big deal for me in my identity as an East Indian person. This is actually a really big deal. It's like, for me, it's like a very big loss where I find it's very dismissed. And even the way that my ex-partner is moving through it, also I can see it's like, okay, well, we're here. It like sucks, but we're here.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I've constantly been like, where did I go wrong? What did I do? How could I have been different? How could I have shown up as a better partner? Or how, like, like this guilt and shame, I think is very rooted in the cultural kind of expectation and the cultural, not just expectation of marriage, but I also feel like culturally the priority of family.
Yeah.
And what I grew up seeing, like from my parents' marriage, from that prioritization of family and what family means. And I grew up in a very nuclear kind of family. And so now, we're separating. We have the one child. I I identify as queer, so I will probably, my next partner, if I get one, will not be a male. Like, so there's all of these other cultural pieces that like are so hard to navigate. And I do find it I find the culture, like the support culture out there, to be very dismissive of that. Like I was talking to um somebody who I was like went on a date with, and right away, like her questions to me were very so where do you see like a partner in regards to like your child, like where's the relationship there, and like this can be a good thing, like step parents are a good thing, and like, and for me it's like, whoa, even the conversation of step parents, it literally, I had a panic attack that
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
It's not culturally what we speak about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, this is way too fast and way too much. And it was really overwhelming. And so I feel like the cultural component actually, it really adds like another layer of just complexity and
And
grief.
expectations probably. Like,
Oh, so many expectations. Like I don't know I don't know which way is right at this point.
yeah, because like I said, I just know from previous conversations with East Indian women that, yeah, like you just said, they say the same thing. Family's everything.
Everything.
You just divorce really isn't an option. Like it's just not something unless, there's abuse or severe alcohol.
Yes,
Those
there's like,
those
there has to be like a good reason for
yeah,
it.
but
Not
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 to
like,
be
yeah.
more fulfilled or heaven forbid to be with a woman.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And
Like
I'm not
so
saying
many
that was
things.
why, but yeah, I'm sure that there must be some eyebrow raising.
Yeah, thankfully my immediate parents are like super accepting, and they not just accepting, but they've seen and they understand that I
Mhm.
am different. I've always moved through life differently, done things differently, but that that dialogue that children grow up with in the home, and what we witness as
Yeah.
children does become our own internal dialogue. So like I said, my parents are still very happily married 54 years later. My parents, me and my sister, are my parents' world. um, so that becomes my inner expectation of myself as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It would. And
Yeah.
whether or not you allow yourself even to have a new family one day. Like, and I'm not even necessarily
Hmm.
talking about children. I'm just talking about a new
A
nucleus, if
new,
you will.
yeah, like even
Yeah.
a new partner for me at this point, I'm like, yes, in theory, yes, I'd like that. And then when I actually think about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it gives me anxiety because I'm like, I don't know. Just that inner dialogue is, well, this isn't what you should be doing. This isn't good for your child. Like, there's this notion of like, it's bad. Like,
Mhm.
it's bad. You are not, you, me, my happiness
It's
shouldn't
not
be,
what this is about, right?
yeah, shouldn't be centered. It should be
Yeah.
centered on my child. And that's been a big conflict for me navigating this space, because I'm like, yeah, but is that true? Like, no. Like, I do think that my happiness will impact my child in a
Exactly.
positive way.
Positively.
But it is that cultural kind of conversation, even if my parents have never said that to me, but just growing up, like, we didn't, even in our circle of East Indian families, there was no, there was, I mean, there was people that were like super, I mean, still, there's members of my family that have been married forever, and it's such a toxic relationship, and
Oh, you can
everybody's
see
like,
it.
why
You
don't
can
you
hear it.
divorce?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they stay, and I'm like, what, how would that have looked different for not just their children, but the other younger family members to witness, them doing it differently? And like, maybe my internal dialogue wouldn't be like how it is.
Hmm. It's reminding me of a woman who came to me, same heritage or cultural heritage as yourself. And she came to me because of her mother. So her mother had left her father recently because he was terribly abusive. And
Mm-hmm.
but still it had taken her 25 years to leave.
Yep.
She waited till the kids were gone, felt she couldn't before then. But when the daughter reached out to me was to help for me to help her mother cut the ties. She still would go over and cook for him. She just didn't
Mm-hmm.
live with him anymore. So she would still cook for him and shop for him, and if he called her because he needed something, she would take care of it like that. And again, it's a cultural thing.
It
He's her
is.
husband, and that was the expectation. And who was she to just leave him in the lurch, and
It's
taking
such a
care of
cultural
himself?
expectation that, like, actually,
Mhm.
when you said that, I realized, and it's not just East Indian culture, because I have a friend who, or had a friend, we're no longer friends, but I had a friend who was Mexican, is Mexican,
Yeah,
where, again, very similar heritage,
yeah.
like that belief system of family comes first. And she was actually in my life when things kind of hit the fan in the relationship. And I was like, this was 2 years ago, where I was at crisis point. And um, anyways, she had called, and it ended up like just telling her. And she said, do you want to come over and chat? So me and my parents um, went over to her place, and we were chatting. And I said, you know what, like, I just don't know if I can manage this. And I've asked him to leave the house right now. I just don't know if I can manage this, what's happening. And I'm like, I was really upset. And basically she had said to me, well, from in my culture, and she said, and I know in yours, family family is everything, and people can change, but they you need to be able to give people like a chance to change. And so I can't remember, she said something like that, not exactly those words, but it shamed me so much
Yeah.
that I ended up going back on my word. And so, like, the separation
Trying
should have
again,
happened
right?
then. Yeah, should have happened then. but I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, this is my husband. This is somebody I should be maybe, putting in my best effort. And, whereas was that a helpful advice? No. Like
Well, no,
it should have just been a space for me to just be and
yeah,
unravel instead of feeling
absolutely.
like I was obligated to fix or to care for this person in that moment where caring for that person was very difficult to do because I
Mhm.
had to I should have been centering care to myself at that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of my probably most listened to episodes actually was one that I did on talking to women who are contemplating leaving
Mm-hmm.
and working through those emotions of, who am I to put my happiness first?
Yeah.
Who am I to stop trying? Um, what they ignore in those statements is the years that they've been trying now because their partner might
Yeah.
say, oh, I didn't know you were that unhappy. Oh, now I'll try a little harder.
Mm-hmm.
And then they feel they have to try again and put themselves through
Yes.
another 6 months, 2 years until it inevitably falls apart anyway.
Totally. That's it.
Yeah.
That's actually like that unhappiness, like when you had when you had your loss of your son and
Mhm.
that voice kind of came in and said, like this person's not going to be there for you.
Yeah.
Um, when my kid was 2, that's when that voice was coming in, just saying to me, "You're not happy. You're not
Yeah.
happy here. You're not happy here." And always I would counter that with, "Yes, but my parents are very happy. How could I disappoint them? My child needs like," and I would just counter it with that,
Yeah.
yeah, my happiness was an afterthought.
And did you explain it away as well with it's my fault because I was really
Oh
depressed?
yeah. Oh, of
Yeah,
course.
exactly.
I'm like
So,
I had postpartum anxiety, so
yeah.
therefore and anxiety for me often shows up as rage, anger.
Yeah.
Like
So
and it
who am I to suddenly say that my happiness matters when I'm the one that's been
yeah.
causing all the problems,
Yeah,
right?
I've been doing that. My chronic health issues, I'm more of a burden. Like I'm not easy to live with. I'm
Yeah.
not easy to love.
Yeah.
Those are the things that constantly and still that's the inner talk that's still happening for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I think we'll probably wrap this up now, but it's been so interesting to talk to you. I've so enjoyed our conversation. I feel like we could probably go on for another hour, but in the interest
We
of trying
probably
to
could.
keep these episodes in a certain length, um, but I really have enjoyed how this conversation has gone and just how all these things tie in because it's life as women. One of these days I'm going to write a book. I keep saying that, but I always said the same thing about a podcast, and here we are, right?
Mhm.
And I know it's going to be a story about women going through life and all the different things that we deal with as women, and through motherhood and marriage and our kids leaving. And see, you're not there yet, but I am, and that's a whole other ballgame.
Oh, I can imagine.
I give actually, so I'm remarried, and I got to say, I do give him a lot of credit for patience because I went through some tough years watching my kids leave home and did not always deal with it very well at all. But he just sat there and smiled and gave me a hug. So
Mhm.
until one day he said to me, he goes, Elizabeth, you got to do something about this because you cry every day. And that's not you. And he was right. That's all he said. Like, get some help, do
Mhm.
something. And
Mhm.
I was like, okay, yes. Anyway, but like I said, there's so much that we go through. And so it's been so interesting to talk to you and because of the work you do as well. I think it's so wonderful the work you do, but I really want to be there for you as you go through this.
Thank you.
And I hope that you feel comfortable, whether you lean on me and the group or you find someone else, but that you know that you deserve support now, and let us walk you through this like you
Mhm.
walk women through their loss. So,
Thank you.
well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here with me today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the conversation and just the space and your reaching out and our connection. Yeah, I just appreciate it. So thank you.
I feel like we'll talk again one day.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Okay.